am passionate about everything in my life. First and foremost, passionate about ideas, and that's a dangerous person to be in this society. Not just because I'm a woman, but because it's such a fundamentally anti-intellectual, anti-critical thinking society.
Gloria Watkins, born September 25, 1952 in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, grew up in a time of immense social and political change. Her early years in education were mixed with discord and adversity as America was swept up in the frenzy of the civil rights movement. Like many other children, Gloria made the discomforting and frightening change from a racially segregated school taught by loving African American teachers to a fully integrated one. She was met with resistance from students and teachers alike. After many grueling years in a difficult uphill battle, she graduated high school and attended Stanford, where she received her degree in English. She followed this up with a master's at the University of Wisconsin, and eventually went on to get her doctorate before teaching at the University of Southern California. It was here where she wrote and published her first book, adopting the pseudonym Bell Hooks, a tribute to both her grandmother and mother. Most surprisingly, she decided not to capitalize her name, saying that where the importance was
the substance of my books, not who I am.
To this day, Bell Hooks has written over 30 books on education, feminism, equality, and most importantly to her, love.
Love is a combination of care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, respect, and trust. The transformative power of love is not fully embraced in our society because we often wrongly believe that torment and anguish are our natural condition.
Her latest work, Teaching Critical Thinking, takes her time as an educator and breaks down how she views how love and communication are pivotal to creating a successful and enjoyable learning experience for teachers and students alike.
She really values the idea of a common ground in a classroom. Students and teachers, they both make mistakes. By having that communication line open, that wrong answers will be given, and it's not a big deal, by letting every person speak without the fear of being ridiculed, you really create the collective effort.
Most critics of Hooks praise her for taking a progressive stance on teaching, saying that her easy communication about sensitive topics in the classroom such as gender, sexual orientation, race, and class is well ahead of its time. But Hooks disagrees. For her, these social taboos are just a part of life.
If I were really asked to define myself, I wouldn't start with race. I would not start with blackness. I wouldn't start with gender. I wouldn't start with feminism. I would start with stripping down to what fundamentally informs my life, which is that I'm a seeker on the path. I think of feminism and I think of anti-racist struggles as a part of it, but where I stand spiritually is steadfastly on a path about love.
Love is where everything begins for her. It is the only thing that has kept her going throughout her education. Memories of her classroom, even being racially segregated, are at the forefront of her reasons for teaching how she does.
She was surrounded by teachers in that school who generally wanted their students to succeed. She was expected to go to college, and she was expected to get a degree. Those are pretty big expectations when you consider what was going on at the time.
I entered the classroom with the conviction that it is crucial for me and every other student to be an active participant, not a passive consumer. Education as a practice of freedom, education that connects the will to know with the will to become. Learning is a place where paradise can be created.
To Hooks, the current education system is too formal. She feels that kids aren't actively learning the material.
Memorizing, taking notes, doing multiple choice tests, what do these prepare kids for? Nothing.
She feels that it's too robotic. You have a teacher that sits in front of the class and just drones on and on. And the students are so focused on writing everything down and taking notes that they don't actually gain anything from the lecture. I mean, these are human beings, and no matter what they tell you, they're not reviewing that when they get home.
More than anything, Hooks is a firm believer in not skirting about the big four. Gender, race, sexual orientation, class, topics usually kept behind locked doors. But to what purpose? Hooks believes that only by speaking of these things can we hope to understand where the social biases come from and try to work beyond them. Gender is one of her biggest issues. A firm feminist, Hooks doesn't so much want women power as much as gender equality.
As all advocates of feminist politics know, most people do not understand sexism, or if they do, they think it's not a problem. Masses of people think that feminism is always and only about women seeking to be equal to men. And a huge majority of these folks think feminism is anti-male. Their misunderstanding of feminist politics reflects the reality that most folks learn about feminism from patriarchal mass media.
Race, too, is important. While focusing on racism itself, it does not need to be in the spotlight always. The sooner we get past the idea of race, the sooner we can focus on more important things.
Things like having to put your race on a test. Why should that matter? Why should your race influence your score? It's just asking for more racism.
As with race, gender, and class, Bell Hooks believes sexual orientation should not be a major focus in everyday life. Hooks critiques systems that do not address these issues. In her opinion, how can we ever move forward if we do not look back to see where we've come from? Beyond the rigid structure of modern schools, Hooks also criticizes proponents who argue for the continuation of this style of learning.
These are the people who talk at us, who by refusing to converse, promote, and maintain a hierarchy of domination wherein withholding gives on power over another person. Conversation is about giving.
With such a monotonous system in place, it's hard to break the mold. But Hooks is certainly trying. Every day she enacts her own style of teaching in her classroom. She also writes for and speaks to other teachers, trying to wake them up to the harsh realities of the world around them. In these, she employs many contributions to what she sees as an otherwise flawed system, including the idea of open communication in a classroom. By being more open, students feel safe in voicing their opinions. More individualized attention to each given student. No standardized tests, with the idea that discussion and hearing the voices of others is more important than stressing over taking an exam. Speaking out about taboo subjects. And finally, utilizing lessons that teach for life beyond the classroom. Teaching to Hooks requires engaged pedagogy.
It begins with the assumption that we learn best when there is an interactive relationship between student and teacher. As leaders and facilitators, teachers must discover what the students know and what they need to know.
This is what Hooks strives to do in her own classroom. Repeatedly, she has said in her books how her role as an educator, as a teacher, is to foster the learning environment into an open forum where she and her students can conceive ideas and form opinions together.
It's brilliant, really. I mean, sure, we all remember being a child and having that one teacher who actually took an interest in our lives. They tend to become our favorite teacher. And that's because they taught us so much outside of the classroom. And even when we were in the classroom, we felt like we mattered.
When one thinks of educational systems today, specific images come to mind. Standardized tests, lectures with note-taking, classrooms set up in structured rows of desks, and the idea that the teacher is always right. Hooks disagrees with these methods.
It's her philosophy to do what her students do.
The one stance Hooks agrees with in modern education is the power of students' voice, though she doesn't think each student needs to speak equal to that of another. Her powerful ideas have brought about a new wave of teaching techniques.
What really strikes me about her way of doing things is the notion that everyone makes mistakes. You don't see that in education, especially at the high school and college levels. The hard truth is, teachers do make mistakes. Hooks promotes this idea of making mistakes and learning from them without embarrassment.
Honestly, I find it stupid how teachers don't want to take an interest in their students beyond the coursework. Students are not numbers, and they're not your job. They're people. Bell Hooks gets the idea of going beyond the classroom, and I think that's really special.
To this day, Bell Hooks still speaks out about the state of teaching and learning in America. Her thoughts on education, on critical thinking, on students, is completely changing the idea of school. Taking with her the lessons she's gained from her youth, she's forging ahead in an otherwise rigid structure.
Changing how we see images is clearly one way to change the world.